I will say I watched a lot of our local media, national media, and interview after interview after interview of I would assume vacationers because they said they've never ridden out a hurricane or so. Their comment was, "We only thought it was a Category 1. You know, it's just a Category 1. We didn't think it was going to be that bad." Um, at some point, we as forecasters, meteorologists, you know, we try to hammer on. Sunday night we were talking about impacts. That's the whole show was impacts, flooding, storm surge, tornadoes. At some point, it's like beating the dead horse, guys. Is it time that we go away from the Saffari-Simpson scale that focuses mainly on wind, and we try to find some new scale that focuses on all the impacts? Because when we say Category 1, people automatically 75 mile per hour wind. They don't come into consideration storm surge, flooding, tornadoes. Is it that time that we have this discussion that it might be valid that we start looking at some other ways to rate these hurricanes?
I
Scotty, it's
think that's
overtime.
actually in progress already. I think that a lot of within the Weather Service, I think there's some preliminary discussion about that already, especially with NHC, and you may have heard that AccuWeather has developed their real impact scale to help to provide better context of the damage potential for a tropical system, and I think that's a good idea, and I think that we need to start pushing more toward developing a new scale, because the Saffir-Simpson scale, it was fine when it was developed and it was fine for a while, but I don't think it's fine anymore.
Scotty, to piggyback on that too, remember Spring-Made Pier? They had the third highest tide on record after Hugo and Matthew from Isaias.
Matthew at the time, Category 1 as well, I believe.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So, I mean, the relationship between Saffir-Simpson category and storm surge was, after Katrina, that was obviously a very hard lesson learned. But more needs to be done on that front. I'm grateful that that there is the emphasis on storm surge as its own hazard. The storm surge warning, I think, is a good product. I think that there is more that we can do to help disseminate that product, although the phones going off is a pretty good way to do it. We need to get people used to that. We need to get people responding to that. And as Kim said earlier, again, you hide from the wind, and you run from the water. And that's, if we can continue, I think the best thing that we can do is continue to hammer that home. Irma, I mean, when Irma hit Charleston, that was the top 5, top 3 tide. There got 9.97 feet, something like that, got very close to 10 feet. And I'll tell you, it's like, Irma was making landfall in the Gulf. That's the thing that was, that's the thing that was, it was crazy. The wind field was just so broad, and it was pushing a lot, and it just had a lot of breath to push a lot of water. So there's no such thing as just a tropical storm. There's no such thing as just a Cat 1. Every storm is different. Just because you might have gone through 1 or 2 okay doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get through the 3rd okay. Things change. Things happen. So it's very important that people pay attention to meteorologists and the discussion of the potential impacts there. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I think if we do that, I think that puts people in a lot better position. But it's about awareness, and it's about some level of personal responsibility too.
Well, I'll say this much: if you're watching this show, and I'm not trying to self-flatter us, but if you're watching the show, you are clearly engaged in weather. So thank you. And I didn't want anyone at home to feel like we were preaching to the choir, because I think the folks who are outreaching know what type of damage they can see. We saw these pictures from Ethan Clark at Ocean Isle, where Hurricane Isaias came ashore, and we saw what 5 feet of storm surge can do, and we saw what can transpire when you have hurricane force winds that somehow or another led to a very large fire, if you were with us Monday night, which Ethan now tells us damaged about 9 homes, and it was just a glowing ball in the sky after the storm came raging through. And so there are a lot of factors that a storm can produce, and to your point, guys, whether it was a tropical storm or a Cat 1, I mean, the difference was just a few miles an hour, and we probably would have had the exact same scenario play out even if it was still a tropical storm, air quotes, when it came ashore.
Intensity is very hard to forecast, and yes, that is absolutely true. Isaias, that intensity forecast, Hurricane Center does a great job with steady state forecasting. I'll preface it with that. But there were significant changes down the road. I mean, a hurricane watch came out, less than 24 hours before landfall, and that was a great call. I mean, that clearly the right call. So there's a lot we have to learn about intensity. Man, we got track down. Track is. You can feel confident that when you see a Hurricane Center track that it's very likely to play out. But intensity is a different beast, and so that's why you prepare for Category up. Oh, it's just a Category 1. We'll get ready for a 2.
Yeah.
And so it's just a tropical storm. We'll get ready for a Cat 1 hurricane.
Yeah, that's something else that may need a new paradigm of thought too. Is the intensity forecast and how to relate that to the public, relate potential to the public, and that the situation is such that this could rapidly intensify coming to the coast, and thus be Category 2, maybe high end 2, when it's currently just barely a hurricane at all. So these are things to think about. We're forecasting this to intensify and be an 80 knot Category 1 storm, but the potential is there for it to be even stronger. And being able to relate that risk to the public is a challenge.